we've been talking a lot about this team for the last couple of weeks. Uncle Stevie running the organization now. We have Sandy Alderson. We have just a completely different management running this organization now. And now we have one of their writers. We are now talking to Metsmerized writer, Matt Musico. What's going on, Matt?
Nothing much. What's up, fellas? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I mean, why not talk Mets baseball? I mean, there's nothing going on with the New York Yankees. So Francisco Lindor, Carrasco, this is big news for New York fans, exciting for New York fans, knowing that the Wilpons, or may we say the Coupons, didn't like to open their pockets. Now we have Uncle Stevie opening his pockets. He's going to pay this kid between $250, $300 million, and he's one of the best players in baseball. What did you think about this trade?
Well, I still don't think it's real, just because Mets fans have been conditioned to not think that good things are supposed to happen to them. So still trying to get used to that. But I actually, for whatever reason, I missed all of the earlier reports on Thursday that were saying that there was momentum toward the trade actually happening. So I didn't even really know that it was happening until the deal was getting finalized. So I don't know how I missed it, but I almost fell out of my chair just because, like you said, I mean, this is one of the best players in baseball. If you look at it, I think since 2015, if you look at certain stats, he's among the top 5 with regard to FWAR and things like that. He's a dynamic dude. He's only 27. So yes, they're going to pay a premium for him, but they're going to get him throughout his physical prime. It's like a dream come true. And, as a Mets fan, we're conditioned to know that, there's going to be a little lull at some point, a little valley. But for right now, it's been a nonstop high since Thursday, at least, just because what we've been waiting for finally happened.
So a lot of baseball people, not just even Mets fans, are saying this is one of the biggest steals they've seen in a while for the player caliber of Lindor. Did you see that trade to be that way? And also, if they do re-sign him, which the Mets are likely to, what do you think his value is going to be, both years-wise and average annual value?
Well, I could see why people would think that it was a steal. I think the runner-up were the Blue Jays, and from what the reports had said, I don't know if their proposed package actually came out, but they had, I think, a better overall package, but it was more long-term guys. And as we've seen over the last 18 months, with the Indians basically shipping out any good pitcher that they have, and they still have a really good rotation anyways, they're trying to thread this needle of not spending any money and also being really competitive at the same time too. So I can see why people would think it's a steal, because when you see these two guys involved in a deal, you would imagine there has to be at least one top prospect involved, and the Mets were able to hold on to all their top prospects. I think the reason why it probably won't end up being a steal is because we don't really know what Rosario and Jimenez are going to be doing yet. They're going to be plugged right into their everyday lineup in the middle infield. So I can see why the Indians were interested in that package specifically, because the AL Central is still pretty much a dumpster fire outside of the White Sox for the most part. So they still have a shot at being competitive, at least getting into October. Advancing through October is another story, but they still have a chance at being good. And these two guys are still super, super young. We don't really know exactly what they're capable of yet. They can end up being really, really good. But I can certainly see why. I mean, I was really happy that the prospects that were not given up are still with the Mets. And, we knew, at least from what we heard from Cohen and Alderson, that, they weren't actually going to do that. This is not a Brody Van Wagenen type of front office anymore. They're not going to give up the world for Robbie Cano and Edwin Diaz again. It's just, when you compare those two deals, it just makes it look even more lopsided. It's just crazy that they gave up more for those two guys than they did to get two of the best players over the past 5 years or so in the league. With regard to his value, I mean, yeah, I feel like $300,000 or $300 million. I wish 300,000. 300 million is probably going to be the starting point. I think when
agree.
Yeah. When they were talking about it, I think maybe it was last spring in Cleveland, when they were talking about an extension. I think Cleveland offered 200 million. He wanted 300 million. And, not much has changed. So I would imagine, I feel like 300 million in 10 years, it's got to be probably around the benchmark that he's looking at. And depending on what's going to happen with Fernando Tatis Jr. over the next couple weeks, he may set the market for that too, even though he's much younger than he is. But I would imagine that's got to be the starting point. And if that's what it is, then that's not a big deal. I don't think.
Well, we'll see. We'll definitely have to see. As you guys know, we are talking to Mets Mirage writer Matt Musico. Now, Matt, I think this was a great move for the New York Mets. They needed a superstar player. I hate when people say this is a guy that's going to be the face for the New York Mets. This is a guy that came from the Cleveland Indians. They have guys like Pete Alonso, I think, is the face of the New York Mets moving forward. He's, what do they call him? The polar bear. He's the guy that I believe speaks up. All the fans have really fled to him as the superstar player. Yes, Francisco Lindor is the probably the most talented player now on this team, a five-tool player that can do everything. He smiles all the time. He puts fannies in the seats. My problem with Francisco Lindor isn't the fact that he isn't as talented as he is. My problem is when you look at his numbers in the playoffs, they're not as they don't pop out as much as they do in the regular season. Did you have any thoughts of that when the Mets made this trade? Or it really doesn't matter? We have to see what he does with the Mets early in the season and see what he could do with the Mets in the playoffs.
Oh, I mean, I don't really care what he did in the playoffs in the past, because the Mets need to get to the playoffs first before we need to even worry about that. So, and lots of times the playoffs can be a crapshoot anyways, too. Even the best of players will struggle in October. So no, I'm not too worried about that. And I think something like this, like you could tell during his presser today, he was invigorated, excited. He's always smiling, but still he was smiling a lot.
Of course.
And he's ready to get to work, and finally being on a team that he knows is planning on investing in the players in the field, which, I mean, in Cleveland, we don't really know, exactly what they're doing. So they're just trying to get the best bang for their buck and not spend a lot of money. So this is a different situation. So, you never know how a player is going to react to that kind of stuff. So, I mean, would I rather have had his postseason experience in the past be a little bit better? Yeah, sure. But I mean, let's just get there first, and then we'll worry about it when we get there.
So the other end of the trade is Carlos Carrasco, who is a good number 2, number 3 type pitcher. He's been an all-star throughout his career. What are you expecting out of him in terms of the current Mets rotation, maybe short-term and also long-term with the last 3 years of his contract? A contract that's actually pretty good too. $12 million, $14 million, which is very good for a player of his caliber. Obviously, he has to stay healthy, but what are you expecting out of Carrasco?
Well, pretty much what we've seen over the last few years. I mean, this past year was shortened for everybody. 2019 was shortened for him because he had leukemia. So he had a little bit of an up and down year, but when you take a look at what he did from 2015 to 2018, he basically was exactly the same. He ate innings. He was around 180, 190, 200 innings, had about 3.5 ERA, was somewhere around 3, 4, 5 F4. So those are what his current projections are right now, and which would make him immediately the second best pitcher on the Mets staff if that's what actually happened. So I would expect him to slot right in behind DeGrom. He's used to that because he was behind Kluber for all those years. So he's kind of used to being the second tier guy in the rotation, and he's taken to it pretty well. I think even if the National League gets the universal DH again, going from American League to National League, people not seeing him for the first time, or people seeing him for the first time, or not for a while. I think all those things are going to play to his advantage. And, he's got those 3 years in his contract. The last one's an option. So they really only have him for 2 guaranteed years. And if things go to hell in a handbasket, they don't have to pick up that option the last year too. So it's obviously, there's a little bit of, I would say, I don't want to say concern, but there's always a little bit of risk when you take on a pitcher who's entering his mid 30s and you're paying him more than $10 million a year to pitch. But when you take a look at his velocity and whatnot, everything's been pretty much the same throughout the last 4, 5, 6 years. So he's just one of those quietly consistent towards the top half of the league kind of arms that the Mets desperately need. I mean, we looked at outside of Peterson and DeGrom last year, the rotation was a dumpster fire, and there was nobody else to depend on. And you can reasonably depend on him to go out every 5th day and take the ball and give the team a chance to win, which is all any team really wants.
Matt, are you surprised that the Mets were the only team, or have been the only team, to make significant moves so far this offseason? I'm very surprised, and I know a lot of Yankee fans are having a heart attack because the Mets got Francisco Lindor, Carrasco. They haven't made a move. DJ LeMahieu's still out there. People and teams are talking to DJ LeMahieu. The Yankees don't want to give him a 5th year. He might be gone. The Yankees are looking at Didi Gregorius to come back to the team if they decide not to go and bring back DJ LeMahieu. Are you surprised that the Mets were the only team out of all these teams that need help in certain aspects of their game, are the only team that have made the significant moves this offseason?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's weird that the Mets are doing it because we're not used to them doing it. But I mean, when you look at, I mean, I still think it's a little bit of baloney anyways, but when you look at the economics of the game, everyone's, crying foul. The Phillies are losing billions of dollars, which is not true, obviously, but, everyone's losing money or losing revenue. So it's like, okay, I mean, the last few years for MLB free agency has been a crawl anyways, from November, December, January into February as it was. And it's just gotten much worse because of everything that happened in 2020 with the COVID impact on the game. So I'm not too surprised. I mean, going into this offseason, it made sense that the Mets would be more active just because they're flush with cash and nobody else is. But then also the Blue Jays are the only real other team that had popped up a lot in early rumors as kind of being more aggressive than any other team would be. And be it as it may, those are the two that were going after Lindor. They were the two that are going after Springer. I don't know how much the Mets are going after Springer now, but still, they're the ones that are kind of hanging out at the top of the market and actually doing things, or trying to do things for the Blue Jays perspective. But I mean, with the Yankees and LeMahieu, it's like, it sounded like, at least from some of the articles that published last night, I think the one on Yahoo Sports, he was only talking to the Yankees. So it's like, all right, go talk to other teams. The Yankees shouldn't be bidding against themselves. I mean, I understand the frustration, but it's like, this is not the old Steinbrenner area Yankees. Like, they have the money to throw around when they want to, but I don't see why Cashman would want to bid against himself to just bring him back. I mean, let him go test the market, and then hopefully they have final say. Because I mean, I would be really surprised if he doesn't go back to the Bronx.
So one of your articles, obviously written before the Lindor trade, but one of your articles mentioned Trevor Bauer and the quality of contract numbers that you think are beneficial to the Mets. Could you explain to the fans what you think could benefit for them pursuing Bauer? And does it change since the Lindor trade, that your perception of it?
Yeah. So for anyone who's not familiar, quality of contact is just like, essentially, it's in a pitcher's batted ball profile. It just kind of breaks down how often they induce soft contact, medium contact, hard contact from opposing hitters. So what I had noticed over the last couple of years in 2018, 2019, obviously, mostly because of DeGrom, he kind of carried the load there. But the majority of their rotation, they were among the top of the league in inducing soft contact and limiting hard contact. And it made sense because throughout the most recent rebuilding phase for the Mets, they were investing in elite young pitching prospects, and were hoping they would turn into a legitimate rotation. The thing that didn't make sense for me, it never made sense, was the fact that they kind of disregarded defense while they were building this, kind of collecting all these elite young starting pitching prospects. So it was beneficial for the fact that they have been so good in the quality of contact area of their game, because if you have crappy fielders, then you want to give them the best chance possible to actually make plays. So they took a little bit of a step back this past year, and someone like Bauer took a step forward in that this past year. And it was aided by a little bit of a shift in pitch mix that he made. So, the last couple of years, even before last year, before they signed Waka and Porcello, I was saying, like, they should be looking at those kinds of guys, because if they're not going to change their defense, they need to at least they need to have pitchers that are able to induce soft contact more often than others to give their guys a chance to make plays. I would be very surprised at this point if the Mets decided to continue to go after Bauer. Who knows how serious they ever really were after getting Carrasco, just because I think they're about like $30 or $40 million under the luxury tax threshold. And some reports last week were saying they wanted to start the season with a little bit of a buffer, like $5 to $10 million underneath the cap, or not the cap, but the threshold, to give themselves a little bit of wiggle room. So, I mean, that you would think, hypothetically speaking, that would rule out Bauer and Springer, but who knows what will happen. It seems as if they're going to kind of go a little bit more towards the second tier of free agents to kind of start to round out their roster, maybe find a center fielder, round out their bullpen, and kind of continue to bolster their rotation.